Testing. Good evening, Florida Democrats! Welcome to the 2025 Florida Blue Leadership Weekend. We are so excited. This weekend is going to be filled with entertainment, trainings, excitement, but most importantly, this weekend is an opportunity for us all to come together, to create a community of fighters, people that are ready to stand up for our state, people who are ready to stand up for our democracy and our Constitution. And so my goal, and the goal of the Florida Democratic Party staff this weekend, is to make sure that when you are leaving on Sunday, that you're equipped for the battlefields that are out in your communities in every part of this state. So tonight, we also have a little bit of an exciting treat. Shh. We have an exciting treat tonight. Because one of the things that we heard a lot after the November 2024 election was, how do we get our message out? Why did we have no message? Who are our messengers? And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure as we opened up this 2025 Leadership Blue Weekend was to make sure that we are going to have a live podcast right here on the stage. And we have with us our very own Sam Schwartz.
Hello, everyone. So great to be here.
And then we also will have on the big screens, for those who know, Aaron Parnes, who's also one of our Florida boys. And Keith Edwards, who's also become one of the big influencers in the podcast. Oh, they're already on there. Welcome, Keith and Aaron. And of course, where is JoJo? JoJo is in the crowd. JoJo from New Jersey is here as well. So we're going to get started because we got a lot to talk about. So I'm going to go put my headsets on and hopefully keep eating, keep drinking. But hopefully you'll be entertained by this conversation.
Okay, so that was pretty great. Thank you to Chair Fried for that really great welcome. As Chair Fried said, my name is Sam Schwartz. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. As Chair Fried was talking about, as Democrats, something that's really important for us leading up to the midterms and, of course, the 28 presidential election is going to be redefining the digital landscape. And something that really contributed to Donald Trump's electoral victory in 24 was what's called the right-wing media ecosystem. And Joe and I actually we're going to be having a presentation on that tomorrow about how it developed and what we can do as Democrats to fight back. But that's why we're so happy to be here with Aaron and Keith, who are really pioneers and innovators in the space. Two of the biggest content creators on the left who are doing their part every day to make sure that we actually have a foothold on social media to fight back against the sort of complete inundation of social media feed or of social media content that the right has kind of grappled onto. So with that being said, thank you so much, Aaron and Keith, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And I do have to do a little bit of a shout out to, Keith was my comms director for my gubernatorial campaign. So
yes.
Glad to know that after our election, that he's gone on to do some really great things across the country and certainly opening up doors and conversations that are necessary in this space.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
A ton to talk about. I think the thing that we want to start off first is with the No Kings protest that happened on the same day as Donald Trump's birthday. And of course, Donald Trump decided to plan an entire $45 million parade on his birthday. But it's not, of course, it's not on his birthday, it's for the military, right? So that's what he would have you think. So of course, that cost of $45 million. And of course, this is juxtaposed by the administration bringing in Elon Musk, who is supposed to root out wasteful abuse and fraud in the federal government. Does that sound like $45 million well spent? Aaron, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, it was definitely not $45 million well spent. Where's Doge when you need them? I really think that I was in Washington, D.C. that day, and the D.C. streets were kind of just as full as any other Saturday. You didn't really have many folks out there, and the parade itself really flopped. But I really think the real message from that day isn't Donald Trump's military parade. It's the No Kings Day protest. The No Kings Day protest had millions of people around the country speaking out, making their voices heard. And I think it's just the beginning. We're going to have more protests in July, more protests in August. I spoke to the organizers. The conservative estimate is 5 million. I know there are estimates of up to 11 or 12 million. I don't know how true that is, but I just think that it turned out to be, I guess, now the third or fourth largest protest in American history. And I think that needs to be the big story of the day, not necessarily the military parade in Washington, D.C. that really didn't have any impact at all.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I saw your recent Instagram post where you talked about the national threshold of 3.5%, that when that is hit, change is kind of inevitable. Could you tell our listeners in person and who are watching this virtually a little bit more about what that might mean?
Yeah, so it's this theory that if 3.5% of the American population decides to do something or advocate for an issue, then that issue will actually, that message will kind of resonate and will break through the echo chambers that currently exist. So I think I don't know about the No Kings Day protest in terms of 3.5% of the American population protesting, but it was at least 1 or 2% of the American population protesting. And if more people come out and make their voices heard, and 3.5% of the American population rise up and make their voices heard and engage in civil disobedience, then you're just going to see real policy change on the national level. And eventually, in 2026, I think you'll see a real change in leadership and government as well.
And I just had one quick question for everybody in this room. Can you raise your hand if you attended one of the No Kings protests on Saturday? Large amount of people in this room, so thank you for participating on Saturday.
Yeah, Keith, what about you? Did you see anything in your coverage that might, inform that maybe we'll hit that 3.5% threshold? Or what were you seeing around the country that should give some people in the room today some hope that we might be heading towards a Democratic majority in 26 or in 28?
Well, I do think just everyone being out is a clear sign that there is change afoot. I think what I loved about this protest is that it was very intentional and organized. I think the resistance in 2016 had a lot of heart, but it was not strategic. And I think the No Kings protest was one of the most strategic protests in American history, certainly in my time being alive. And so to me, it gives me hope that we are actually not only resisting Trump in a way that is effective, but we're also doing it in a way that makes a real impact. And, they don't usually want to talk about protests. They only want to talk about them if they turn out how they do in LA, which is with a bit of violence. But but they had no choice but to cover it because we made it so big. And I think that is, to me, one aspect of this that is giving me hope that we're actually doing stuff strategically rather than just, one thing after the other.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that's given us some hope here, at least in Florida, is that those two special elections, of course, by our Democratic nominees, Gabe Vallimont and Josh Weil. I think we have some people who work on the Josh Weil campaign here. There was a huge Democratic overperformance in those two districts. In fact, we flipped, I think it was Escambia County in Gabe Vallimont's district. That was flipped blue. Which is in credit to the volunteers who are here in this room. Yeah, applause definitely needed for that. But so to me, in Florida, that is a really good indication that we might be heading towards a different place, and we might be seeing some Democratic victories here in the midterms.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw overperformance in both CD1 and CD6. Because we saw when our candidates were talking about the issues that were really important to the people on the ground, which was the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, the cuts to the VA and to our veterans, and in both districts, there's a significant amount of veterans and military bases. I think in CD1, there's at least 3 military bases. And so people are frustrated. And we've had 30 years here in the state of Florida of one-party control of our state. And now we have become one of the most unaffordable states in the nation. People can't sell their houses. They can't afford their rent. They can't afford their property insurance. They can't afford their healthcare system. And so everything is breaking all at once. And it gives us as Democrats an opportunity, as long as we are organizing now, do y'all hear me? As long as we are organizing now, that we can in fact give, and I think that it's actually, Congressman Frost says this a lot, that we are not, that we're not the resistance party, but we're the opposition party. We're not the minority party, we are the opposition party. And so, but we need to give people a reason to vote for us. And so showing up at these protests, showing up what we believe in, fighting for our shared values as Americans, because I don't know about you all, for those who attended some of these protests over the weekend, we didn't just see Democrats out there. We saw Democrats, independents, Republicans, everybody lining up to try to fight for our democracy. And one other thing which is really amazing about you, Sam, and Aaron, and Keith, I'm going to pull you out of this conversation for 5 seconds, but the youth vote and the youth engagement, love you, my friend, but that you really are seeing, as we know in history, that the greatest movements come from the younger generation. They're the ones who are moving the ball forward. They're the ones who are out there. And so your generation who is taking this ball and running with it gives all of us across the nation hope that there's going to be a democracy tomorrow.
Definitely, and that really is a good segue into our next topic, which is, what can young people, or really anyone, do right now to make a difference? As Chair Fried was saying, young people have really been instrumental in many of the largest movements in our country, whether it be the civil rights movement, whether it be the fight for women to have the right to vote in this country, and of course the March for Our Lives protests and general calls for gun safety that came out of Parkland, Florida, which is of course how I got my start. For those of you who don't know, my cousin Alex was unfortunately one of the victims in that shooting. So I was kind of on the ground for all of that and seeing how young people can really make a difference and lead the charge in that. I don't know, I'll pass it to you, Keith. What can people do right now to make a difference leading up to the midterms, or to make their voices heard right now, even though we have a Republican majority in the House and the Senate?
Well, I think the important thing to know is that protest doesn't have to look like any one thing. It can be very creative. Just this past week, we saw drag queens in full drag go to Kennedy Center to watch Les Mis when Trump was there. That is a form of protest, and that is a way of standing up for yourself and your community. We saw a couple days ago, maybe it was last week, a young woman saying the Spanish Star Spangled, or there's a Star Spangled Banner. Rather than the English, even though she was told not to. So be creative in your activism. It doesn't have to just look like holding signs and marching. It can be many different things, and in all of these different ways do make an impact. They grow the movement, and they also they get attention, which is the whole point. We need people to know what's going on, and my fear is that sometimes Americans can be checked out. And so it's things like this that can wake them up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Aaron, do you have any thoughts on what people can do right now to make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I tell everyone this when they ask me this question. The simple answer is use your voice. And I think it doesn't matter whether you have 1 follower or 10 million followers. It doesn't matter whether you are online or on the ground. You have some sort of influence. Right? You have influence in your community, influence in your family, influence at the dinner table, influence online. You have influence, and your voice is your power. So if you use your voice collectively, our collective voice will prevail and will defeat any misinformation out there. Will kind of push back against all their talking points, whether at the doors or online. So my biggest tip is really just continue speaking out, continue using your voice. And if you don't feel comfortable using your voice, that's fine. But talk to your family members, talk to your loved ones, talk to those you talk to on a daily basis, and use your voice that way. So I think just continue speaking out is my biggest tip.
Yeah, definitely. And I really liked what you said about talking to people that you know in real life. That's one of the most proven effective ways to actually make change in politics. It's more effective than door knocking. It's more effective than phone banking, is actually talking to someone you know in real life, whether it be a member of your family or your friends. Talk to them about why this Donald Trump administration is actually affecting not only young people, but veterans, but the rights of people to come into this country, the rights of people who are currently American citizens or who are here on legal status, who are kind of being abducted by ICE and just thrown into an unmarked van and shipped off to like El Salvador, to a prison. Talk to them about why that's actually hurting people in this country, and that they might have to fear that.
Yeah, and something that we talk a lot about here inside the party is making sure you're telling stories, because everybody's got a story right now. Whether it is somebody that that has lost a family member because of ICE, or you are a senior and you're scared that you're not going to have your Social Security or access to Medicare or Medicaid. or if you're a veteran and no longer can get into the VA for any of your healthcare systems. Everybody's got a story about what is affecting them at this moment. Our farmers, my God, as past commissioner of agriculture, I still speak to a lot of our farming community. And not only have, that people don't know and realize that when they cut the USA aid, that was $5 billion of American agriculture that they cut. And all the feeding programs, while they're trying to screw the little guy and try to harm families, farmers are the ones who produce the food for the food banks. And so now it's a double whammy that not only are you cutting food supplies off for people and for families that need it, but you're also hurting the economic driving of our state and our country. And so we have a lot of people that have stories. So it's really important that as you're crisscrossing the state and the country, to be sharing those stories. But to your point, because of people's distrust now of legacy media, that people are looking for other ways to gather that information. And when you're able to share a story of why that's important to you, or the story that you heard from that small business owner who now, because of the extreme amount of tariffs, they're going to go out of business. These are the types of stories that are the American heartbeat of our country, and we got to make sure we're telling them.
Yeah, that's very well said. And speaking about ways that we can talk to people about what's happening in the country and, I guess talking points, for lack of a better word, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the big ugly bill, as I call it. We're not going to use the term big beautiful bill because it really isn't.
I call it the big bullshit bill.
That might be a better word for it. Or like the big billionaire bill or something like that, because that's really what it is. It would be raising or lowering taxes for the wealthiest 1% of Americans in this country, which of course are billionaires, and actually increasing them if you are making the lowest amount of money in the country. It's completely just an insane concept, but something actually in that bill, the big ugly bill, is very applicable to Florida specifically, that FEMA, which of course is providing aid and funds to rebuild after hurricanes or natural disasters. And in Florida, we're really hit hard by that. Of course, we're like sticking out right in the middle of the ocean. We're a big target for hurricanes. But FEMA is set to receive sweeping spending cuts in Florida due to Trump's policies. Of course, this is going to significantly affect our the federal government's and Florida's ability to provide aid funding for families, Floridian families who are affected by upcoming hurricanes. Of course, this upcoming hurricane season is predicted to be an above average hurricane season in terms of the severity. Of course, warmer waters caused by climate change, another thing that Republicans refuse to even they just call it a climate hoax. They won't even acknowledge that it's a reality. So those are some things that we can talk to our friends in Florida about. But how do you anticipate that the cuts to FEMA being affecting Floridians this year?
Well, we're already seeing it across the country. We're seeing governors like Andy Beshear, who will be here tomorrow, and we're seeing even Sarah Huckabee in Arkansas, that even in a red state where we're seeing natural disasters, whether it's flooding or from tornadoes or hurricanes, and even then trying to ask for emergency disaster packages, and the president denying emergency aid. And here in Florida, all right, my Floridians, how many people have experienced a hurricane in the last 3 years? Basically the whole room. And if you don't have FEMA, and look, as somebody who is involved in the emergency management system and who saw the aftermath of the hurricane, yes, our local electeds are the first people on the ground. They're the ones who are there first. But it is FEMA who is there to make sure that you've got a tent, that you got blue tarp that you can put over your house, that you've got money that you can go to a hotel, or making sure that there's food there and that a community is able to rebuild faster. And the problem is that when you don't have an emergency management like FEMA, and yes, there's problems with FEMA, 110%, but completely gutting it is going to make families who can't afford to be able to go into a hotel or wait until their contractor finally calls them back because they have a third house in another state. It is those families that are going to be hurt the most.
Absolutely. So I'll pose this question to Keith or Aaron, whichever of you want to answer this, but I'm sure you've unfortunately had to spend more time reading the contents of this big billionaire bill than most of us would like. Are there any other spending cuts or things that would significantly affect Floridians or Americans that people should know about who are listening today or who are in this room? And either one of you could answer that.
Yeah, I think there are three parts of this bill that are actually some of the most dangerous parts of the bill, sometimes even more so than some of these spending cuts, because the spending cuts will take effect in a couple years from now, won't take effect now. The number one is the contempt of court provision, which will make it harder for federal judges to hold Donald Trump and the Trump administration in contempt of court, essentially requiring anyone who sues the federal government to now post a bail, a bond, a lot of money, to be able to then hold Trump and his cronies in contempt of court. That's number one. Number two, there is a provision in the bill that'll make it easier to purchase gun silencers in all 50 states around the country. Not sure why you need a gun silencer when you have a firearm. Second Amendment, great, but gun silencers are now going to be easier to purchase. And number three, it'll prevent AI regulation on the state level for a period of 10 years, which will be so dangerous because right now, and this is something that even Republicans aren't a fan of. Marjorie Taylor Greene says she's not going to vote for this bill when it comes back to the House because of this AI provision. Apparently, she didn't read it the first time around, but it is such a dangerous provision and prevents AI regulation for the next 10 years. So be mindful of those three provisions. I mean, there's a whole host of other bad things in the bill. But I also want to say that everything in this bill will not take effect until after the midterm elections, and for good reason. Republicans in Congress don't want this impacting their next 18 months on the campaign trail. They want to be able to say they passed this bill, and then you won't really feel the impacts until December 2026 or January 2027. So it's intentionally designed that way so that you don't actually feel any impacts before the midterms.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the Republicans want to pass this bill and get the credit for passing something, but they don't actually want to deal with the ramifications of the harmful effects of what the contents of their bill will actually do to their constituents. People like Mike Johnson, who have a high percentage of his constituents are low-income Americans who rely on things like SNAP benefits, like Medicaid, like Medicare, and of course this bill is poses significant cuts in funding to that. Keith, what about you? Have you seen anything that would pose a risk to Americans with this bill that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, to me, the headline that Aaron touched on is the AI regulation and states not being able to adequately regulate AI. Like think about how, I don't know, what if you have like a big truck driving community in the Midwest and you don't want it so that big corporations can hire only self-driving vehicles. That's something they probably would not be able to regulate in those next 10 years. I'm not sure what the Florida connection would be with that, but there is very much so tangible things that this bill would do that would prevent us from being able to stop the worst aspects of AI before we even know what they are.
Yeah, definitely. Have either one of you seen any indication from some maybe swing Republican senator votes that they might not be really in favor of voting for this? Maybe this bill would fail in the Senate even before these cuts would pass?
Yeah, so the bill as is going to fail 100%. I mean, you have Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins already publicly against the bill in its current form. That's 4 senators. They can only afford to lose 3. But I think the bill is going to change. I think there'll still be cuts to Medicaid, still be cuts to SNAP, still some of these weird provisions, but it's not going to be the same House bill that was passed. So we have to see what the new bill will be. I think ultimately a bill will pass because Republicans know how to get in line at the end of the day, but I don't know what that'll look like. But the current iteration of the bill, that's not passing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And I think, a reason why some of these swing Republican votes in the Senate have been unwilling to vote is because they know of the pushback they'll get from people who have been calling their offices consistently, voicing their stark opposition to the contents of this bill. So for those of you watching, all of the calls that you've made to your senators have been significantly helpful in that effort to make sure that this bill does not get anywhere near passing. But yeah, Chair Fried, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, even going back to talking about these senators, that a lot of these senators right now are in a very huge predicament. Look at John Holloway. He's talking a lot about the fact that if they actually move forward, a lot of the hospitals, the safety net hospitals in rural parts of his state, which is the same thing here in our state and in a vast majority of this country, will actually shutter and close their doors. And so this is going to be a real big realignment conversation about what is important to Republicans, what's important to their constituents, and are they willing to step up for their constituents? Republicans are always supposed to be about the rural parts of our country, always supposed to be about agriculture and farming, always supposed to be about our veterans and the VA. And yet all of the legislation that we've been seeing and the conversations from Donald Trump is, screw all of these people. I mean, we just saw that they're cutting even all of the housing benefits, not all of them, but a significant program in the housing benefits for veterans, potentially putting 80,000 veterans homeless. And here in Florida, where we've got 1.4 million veterans that live here in the state of Florida, that's going to be a significant amount of people here in our state that will be impacted by even the conversations and these types of programs being cut. But I think that overall, what Keith and what Aaron and what you are doing, Sam and JoJo are doing, that you're creating these conversations and this dialogue, which is really, really important because one, making sure that we've got new voices that are out there taking it to the man, talking the truth, and making sure that we're standing up for our collective values. But also the recognition and understanding that we got to go to spaces where not traditional media, and making sure that we're getting new voices and new opportunities to make sure that people hear what the values are that we stand up for, and that we're going to build a big coalition for the 26 midterms.
Absolutely. Well, I think you heard it there, folks. We're going to have a great weekend here. We have, of course, Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey here as one of our keynote speakers. We have Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky coming. And of course, that's going to be tomorrow for their keynote address to Florida Democrats. So I think we have 30 seconds left. Any closing thoughts about this upcoming weekend?
Upcoming weekend is going to be fantastic. It's going to be an opportunity again for us all to come together. Make sure that we are in an opportunity to learn what is necessary for training on the ground, that we've got information about how to make sure that our voices go further, and how to work together. I think that some of the things that we see all the time from Democrats, we don't fall in line, right, guys? We don't fall in line, that we respect each other's voices, but sometimes those voices get muted when other people are too loud or not loud enough. So I think this weekend is an opportunity that we get the trainings, everybody hears from each other, supports one another, and we walk away with an actual game plan. Because Florida Democrats, we're going to take back this state. We are going to take back this state because the work that you all are doing on the ground, the candidates that we're recruiting, and of course, making sure that we're lifting up our youth voices all across our state. And I just want to say something too about March for Our Lives. When the NRA filed bankruptcy in Texas, I called David Hogg and I said, you all did that. That without the youth movement and March for Our Lives, that is why the NRA was filing bankruptcy. That is why their power has been diminished across the state and across the country, because our newest generation stood up, fought back, organized, and we're not taking no for an answer, and is making us a better state, a better country, a better party. And that's how we're going to make things happen. So, Sam, I'm so inspired by your generation every single day, making us all better.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. Aaron, Keith, I want to thank you so much for being here, joining us tonight. And thank you, Florida Democrats, for being here. And thank you so much again.
Thanks, guys. Love ya.
Thanks.
Bye.